full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
There you all are. Good morning, EduFolk. I hope you are well. It is Sunday. We are back for another weekly review. And today I have the privilege of being joined by Christopher, John and Kathryn. So good morning to all of you. On today's agenda, we have concerns over teachers' unpaid overtime, we have the teacher pay delay, and we have a story that has had the internet up in arms, which is the canteen queuing system at a school in Brighton. So without further ado, let's get underway with this first story today, which is concern over teachers' unpaid overtime. Now, teaching unions are accusing ministers of, in quotes, daylight robbery, as a TUC survey reveals teachers perform the most unpaid overtime, the only other professions where they're seeing as much, if not more, are in healthcare and in social work. But there are reports that over two out of five teachers are working 26 hours for free each week. The UK collectively, apparently it's 5.5 million hours, which is ridiculous. And of course, this feeds into concerns, as usual, that teachers are overworked and underpaid. The teachers, the survey that took place from the TUC puts us ahead of chief executives, managers and directors in terms of the number of hours worked, and is calling for dramatic change alongside the unions. Kathryn, I'm going to come to you first on this. I mean, none of this is shocking to you, really, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not shocking. I think teaching is one of those things where you can't really perform your job if you haven't prepared properly. Where you can't perform your job properly if you haven't prepared properly. And experience does an awful lot to make sure that you are sort of, able to sometimes, go with the rough and smooth of the school day. But, if you haven't, if I've just written myself my to-do list for tomorrow, which is to make sure that I've planned my year 13 lesson for period 1. Now, I know what we're going to do, but if I don't do something about that this afternoon, then they're not going to have a great experience. And that's, I have to do it. So I know it's going on. And I think it's one of those, it's difficult to stop. And I went to see Dear England last night, and they were saying, Gareth Southgate says, I've got to fix the car, but I'm driving the car and it's already going at 100 miles an hour. That's kind of where we are. We can't stop, but we do need to really seriously address it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Patrick Roach, who is the General Secretary of the NASUWT, has criticised the government for relying on what he calls free labour instead of investing in schools and colleges. I mean, Christopher, is that what it feels like to you? That you're doing a lot of free work alongside what you're paid to do?
It doesn't feel quite as much like that as it used to. So I wasn't particularly surprised by the report when it came out. The workload increases that come every time a new statutory duty is invented means that teaching in the UK for quite a long time actually has been considerably about more than just planning, delivering and assessing good lesson content. When I used to work in a state secondary school in my early career, so going back about 16 years now, I would be regularly working on a Saturday afternoon, doing all kinds of things, writing new schemes of work, reading set texts as an English teacher, doing a bit of marking, planning for the week. Quite a lot of the reading would be done on public transport, actually, in London while moving from place to place. So that kind of made it tolerable. But I now work in a boarding school, which is teaching and working and looking after students 7 days a week. So my teaching day now actually finishes at 3:30 on a Saturday, but So I'm still working on a Saturday afternoon, but of course I've now got a summer holiday pattern that reflects the fact that my 190 days of teaching feature Saturdays. So in terms of the balance, it's just about right, I think. I'm still on site about 60 hours a week, but I tend to get most of my work done at school because I've decided I don't want to do much of it at home if I can avoid it. So in that sense, it's not surprising, but I think teachers have to be quite careful about how they manage their own time, really. And those things that they can make decisions about, they probably should make decisions about. And those things they can't make decisions about, we need other people to make decisions about, really. The Guardian report suggests that teaching is synonymous with shift work in the eyes of the TUC, and I'm not quite sure it is. I mean, we do work shifts in my school because supervision is required through the day and through the night. But I don't really see my work as comparable to shift work in the normal understanding of that. Could I earn more in a different profession? Probably. But I entered school teaching from university teaching, and there are fewer more precarious professions at the moment than working in UK universities. So, yes, I'd like to see some improvement, but I recognise that there's only so much improvement that can be done on the individual teacher level, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you for a very, excuse me, for a very detailed answer there. And John, I suppose a slightly different question to you on this, because respectfully, you've been out of the game, as it were, for a little bit. Sorry, trying to be tactful there, probably failed miserably. But I mean, have you noticed, I mean, speaking to teaching colleagues, speaking to your Teachers Talk Radio colleagues, have you noticed a difference in the amount of extra work, as it were, that teachers are doing, or amount of time they are spending working? Has it been noticeable to you compared to the time that you started and maybe finished working?
Well, yeah, the trend in my career was for increasing. I think it was a cultural trend to expect more of teachers, and that lessons became, as Chris said, you're not simply delivering a body of knowledge. You probably never were. Maybe there was a sort of halcyon days even before I started teaching, when you walked into the room with a bit of chalk and you sort of just made it up. Come on, boys, what are we doing today? Come on, lads, let's do some fun stuff, and so on. And and I have winged a few lessons, as every teacher has. There are occasions when various things have happened and you think, I am utterly unprepared for the next half hour, or 2 hours, or whatever it is. And some might work all right. Some of the best lessons, I hate to think, were sometimes done like that, but mostly not. Mostly you have to be prepared, and going in unprepared is a disaster. And the trend towards over the years was to more things, not just schemes of work. How many schemes of work get written and rewritten, reinventing the wheel, filing them away? You've got your schemes of work done, they have to be updated. No one ever looks at them. How many schemes of work have I produced that I've never ever looked back again at? I think, what's the purpose of that? The hours that went into it. So there was an element of the iceberg about teaching, which is the lesson is the bit you see, and the rest is the rest of your life. Probably always like that. The trend in my life, to go back to your question, Lucy, is it got worse over the years. I'm not surprised Chris's experience in private education is different. I think in a sense, private education is more honest in all sorts of ways, culturally and structurally, about what schools actually are. And I think in state education, there's a sort of dishonesty. You're a profession, but you're not really a profession. You're workers, but it's a business, but it's not really a business. And so and you're social workers, but you're not really social workers. So there's a fudging and a confusion about what we're doing. And in the end, it comes down to teachers doing an awful, awful lot in their time outside schools. And that trend, I think, has continued. I'm not surprised, Kathryn, you started by saying, I'm not surprised. I'm all across Britain, anyone listening to this, hearing about teachers do a lot of work outside lessons. They're going, yeah, really?
Sparkling revelation.
An amazing piece of research. I remember walking to school in the mornings, passing a primary school. And if I thought I had it hard sometimes, walking past a primary school about 6 a.m, the teachers are in. Well, it wasn't 6 a.m. I was left the house at 6 a.m. Past 7 a.m, the teachers are in. I thought, how long have you been in? And then at the evening, I'm walking home rather wearily from school. They're in it. They're still there. They're putting things on boards and making displays and all the things that I didn't tend to bother with too much. Goodness me. I mean, it has expanded and expanded. And if anyone's saying out there, yeah, but you get long holidays are full of all sorts of things that you do to prepare for school.
And I think,
unfortunately.
yes, and I think this is, I know I say this a lot, part of an ongoing discussion that I'm sure you'll hear lots about on Teachers Talk Radio. And next, we're going to talk about the teacher pay deadline. There's plenty to say on this, so back with you in a moment. Now, another story that may not come as much surprise to you. The government is set to miss the deadline for submitting written evidence in negotiations for this year's teacher pay deal, despite previous promises to stick rigidly to that schedule. The unions were informed by the School Teachers Review Body, which is going to be referred to now as the STRB, said that they were not going to meet the 21st of February deadline for submitting evidence. Of course, this has ignited frustration amongst the main unions, including the NEU and the NAHT, and the Association of School and College Leaders. All of the unions have written a joint letter to the STRB expressing that they are very unhappy. And this is kind of compounded by delays and previous strikes. And this is part of, obviously, the ongoing recruitment and retention crisis in teaching. Christopher, coming to you first on this, is there any shock here? Any surprise that the government have missed the deadline on this?
Well, it's the DfE, isn't it? So it's coming from the DfE. Now, they've not been underburdened with work in the last 2 or 3 years. So I'd suspect that there's quite a lot of civil servants feeling the pressure, actually, in trying to get everything done that needs to be done. But the DfE does need to sharpen up its act here. I mean, if it's supposed to submit evidence to the review board every year so that the review board can get its recommendations out on time, then it needs to be doing that, because obviously schools are already planning budgets for staffing for next year, and it's quite difficult to make those decisions when you don't know how much you're going to be paying your staff when they are the major outgoing of most school budgets. So too much school budget planning really has been done on the basis of guesswork and hopeful worst case scenario planning over the last few years, and we need something better, really. As I say, the department has had a lot to manage over the past 2 years, but we should be expecting a higher standard of efficiency from, such a significant government department. It's going to need to draw on all of the evidence available to it, and the government's evidence is probably quite crucial, as the government are supplying the money, one would hope, to make these things happen in schools. So yeah, I can understand why the delays happen, because I know lots of people are working very hard in the DfE, but we need to get it out much more quickly, and we need to be on top of things.
Absolutely. And John, coming to you on this, any surprises here for you, or is this just more of the same from the DfE?
Well, it is a bit surprising in a way. I shouldn't be surprised, but it is a bit surprising that after last year and the struggles over teachers' pay and the settlement and so on, that here we go again. That's a bit of a surprise. You think, well, it's not so much of a surprise, because we are in the dying embers of a government, and the tide has gone out, and you can see the sticky bits of the government there. You can see, like, Kimmy Badenoch, like a mollusk hanging onto something, and she is. And the reason I thought of that was because the insight into this was Kimmy Badenoch's fallout with Henry Staunton over an alleged remark that the civil servants made to her, made to him on her behalf, that the government should limp. I think it was limp. The post office should limp towards the next election and take their time over settlement with post office workers. Whether they said that or not, it's clear. I'm sure they did, actually, and that, I think, is what's happening. We're into the pre-election period when things are being put on standby. Wouldn't it be great if the Labour government, which is undoubtedly coming at some point this year or early next, at the very latest, had to deal with this problem among other problems? So there's a distinct kicking this down the road and into the future. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way. I sympathise with civil servants, as Chris said. My daughter's a civil servant. I get an insight into the kind of work they do. I doubt that this is a problem of workload. It's a problem. It's a political will. I got my pay rise the other day. It was painless, most painless pay rise I've ever had. A letter came through the post and it said, "You've got an 8% pay rise." Oh, thank you very much. 8% pay rise. And that's because I'm retired and I'm a voter, or I'm most likely to vote. So all retired people out there, we're being buttered up nicely by our regular and no problem pay rise. And I thank you for it, government. And I wish you could do that for teachers as well.
Wow, very, very beautifully put. And Kathryn, coming to you, I am sure you have got some feelings on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was striking last year. It frustrates me that nothing ever seems to really change, and I get frustrated with the union side as well, because I actually don't always think it's about money, although it's important. I think it draws attention to a really narrow part of the discussion, but I also think it indicates value. So it conveys the value that is placed upon the profession, and we're not the only profession that is being devalued in the messaging around how things. You just have to look at I haven't watched it yet, but the hospital drama last week. There's all kinds of terrible, shocking things: the post office, the hospitals, the teachers. But I'm reading a book at the moment, which I won't name, but it's basically somebody has written a book about what it's like to be in government, in politics. And I think they're going to be off a lot of Christmas cards lists. And it's very interesting insight. But this idea that it's the wind down, from reading that book, it kind of feels like it's just always like that. It's just we're seeing it. But it's one's opinion. But it makes you go, this is just chronically inefficient, and it's just people playing politics, which actually wastes money and doesn't ever change anything. And that is quite insulting when you work and you pay your taxes and those kinds of things.
Your absolute best. Absolutely. Well, Brent Poland has commented, "We don't accept excuses for missed deadlines from the kids. Then why should we accept them from the DFE?" Valid point indeed there from Mr. Brent Poland. Before we move on to our next story, I should remind you that this show is sponsored by John Catt Educational. And we've still got a lovely code in place for you, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there. It is JCTTR2324, and that gives you 20% off all the books from John Catt. We've had a number of shows where we've spoken to authors of John Catt publications, far too many to mention, but they are all there on the website. If you just want to treat yourself to some CPD, you can go and do that. There is a wide-reaching catalogue covering a variety of areas in education. Just go and have a look at johncattbookshop.com and you can find everything there. And please do use that discount because we won't have it forever. So enjoy it while it's there. Okay, in a moment, we are going to move on to a story that when Teachers Talk Radio posted it on X, it went more viral than we thought it would. So we'll come back to that in a moment. Now, this next story is an interesting one, and many opinions have been expressed on it. So, the Dorothy Stringer School, which I believe is a school in the Brighton and Hove area, has implemented a new school canteen queuing system for pupils, prioritizing when they can queue based on their attitude to learning scores, or ATL scores. Parents have been very critical of this system, expressing concerns about potential public punishment, as well as the effect on children with additional and special educational needs. However, the head, Matt Hillier, has defended the system, said it was successfully trialled with their Year 11s originally and is now going to be put in place for their Year 9s as well. And it has removed poor queuing behaviour and provided quicker access for everybody involved, regardless of their attitude to learning. He has also clarified that he has considered students with additional needs, and they already have something in place that allows them to bypass the queue. So there have been many reactions to this, comparisons with China, mentions of a sort of a Hunger Games type situation. It has escalated into far more of a story than I imagined the head teacher thought that it would. So, John, coming to you first on this, I'm sure you have read some of the comments underneath Teachers Talk Radio's X post. X, formerly known as Twitter. What are your feelings on this? Do you think that you should be allowed to queue? I should also stress that this was mentioned, this was only employed at break times and not lunch times at the moment as well. So your thoughts on this, John?
Well, my thoughts are in retirement, I'm now going to write a book, and it's going to be the collected examples of daft stuff basically clever people do. Or daft stuff well-intentioned people do. It's probably been written. It's probably
copyrighted here and now. You've got that, so no one is allowed to use that. We look forward to this in the coming years, John. You've said it now, so.
Well, yeah, and it may actually be, now I think about it, every history book is daft stuff people actually do with good intentions. That actually might be this every history. But in there, I would include this, and I'd include things like, these are genuine examples I know of from my career. Students writing targets on their books so that they could target grades fixed at the beginning of the year based upon various assessments. Then they came into school, your target A, your target B, your target C, they'd write them on their books so the teachers can know what the target was. Wearing badges, red colours, blue colours and so on, indicating whether they were high or low achievers. Unbelievable. When we walked around the school, that's actually a school that did that. And another one was writing things on the board. Some of you will know this. Some of you at the end of the lesson, most of you will know this, and all of you will know this. It's insane. It's completely insane. And another one was little plastic cards given to teachers at one time, which were a script of things. If you encounter a student misbehaving, you whip out your plastic card and you say to them, I'm very disappointed by what you're doing, or something like that. Daft things teachers do with good intentions. And this is one of those. It is daft. They surely be regretting it. It's everything possible is wrong about this, really. And lots of the comments that came in from parents saying, well, it's a good idea, actually. Responsibility, teach them real life. Well, this isn't real life, except in one perverse sense. In real life, things are chronically stupid and unfair. And this may be an example of that. What the lesson people think they're being taught is that if you do these things, there is consequences for your behavior. This won't teach that. It'll only alienate kids. I advise schools not to do it. It's really a very daft idea, even possibly with good intentions.
And Kathryn, we know that children are obviously not daft, and if they have not been kind of told about this in the explicit sense, I'm not quite clear on whether they were or they would. They'll figure it out, surely, and it'll dawn on them pretty quickly that you have to go to the back of the queue because your score's lower than mine. I mean, that's terrible as well.
Yeah, and I think it is. There's where to start. There's so many issues with it. It's on a plastic card, as I think, which has been printed, which suggests to me that you can't like make it up, you can't like, I've slipped up this morning, I was having a bad day and I've behaved better. And so I don't like the fixedness of it. I mean, I do think that if no one's going hungry, there's enough food for everyone, or, all of that stuff that's happening. If the queuing system is more orderly and it's actually quicker, so everyone's getting fed faster as well, that's good. That's a good outcome. But yeah, I mean, my worry is that there's going to be teachers who it's the consistency of application. Yeah. So I know from my experience, when I judge whether a student has had a good attitude to learning, I will try and take into account all of the things, to quote Immanuel Kant, ought implies can. If you can't physically do something, maybe you stim or whatever, or you doodle or whatever it is because of your SEND, then you shouldn't be punished and you shouldn't be stopped because you cannot not do it. Do you see what I mean? You're not responsible morally for that action. And I know that there's going to be discrepancies across, how do you know that every teacher applies it consistently? How, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to know how those decisions are arrived at. The relationship with the teacher, a newer teacher, a more experienced teacher. I think it's good that everyone still gets fed, and I think it's good that the queue is more orderly. But I think that's where my everything else is really problematic.
Absolutely. And Christopher, finally, just coming to you on this, your thoughts on this whole procedure, process, system.
It's strange, isn't it? The canteen queue is always the potential flashpoint. And I can remember being a schoolboy myself reading all kinds of accounts of these things happening or similar things happening in different ways, slightly less structured ways, in all of the books about school life that we were reading when we were school children. You know, these kind of things feature in books from Billy Bunter to Mallory Towers, essentially, issues around these kind of things. How do you serve everyone when everybody can't be served at the same time? The question is always who goes first, isn't it? I don't think I'd like to see this kind of thing employed in my own school, so I wouldn't like to see ID cards with attitudes to learning issued to our students for their place in the canteen queue. Would I like it determined by alphabetical order of surname? Well, as a long-suffering V myself, probably not. I seem to remember being last for quite a lot of things at school when we were ordered by alphabetical order of surname. So what might be tried instead? Well, have they considered alternating service times by house or year group or tutor group or something similar? I mean, surely the actual experience of life is that everyone gets the experience of being first and last in many things that we do in any aspect of life that we choose to go into after school. And in my own particular school, we also remember the significant phrase from Matthew that the last shall be first and the first last. So I think I would be looking at a different way of getting my students through the canteen or dinner hall as quickly as possible, and it wouldn't involve putting numbers onto ID cards.
Well, there you go. Some very strong thoughts on that story, and I'm sure again we will hear more about it. I don't think somehow it's going to be the last of it. Right, so that's it for our stories today. In a moment, we are going to talk about our shows of the week. Ooh, who to pick on first for shows of the week this week? Because there have been some brilliant ones. Kathryn, I think I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to. I'm just checking the title. Teacher Training Today: How Effective Are the Accelerated Pathways with Michelle Hines. I thought it was really interesting. She discussed the Teach First pathway. She had on a couple of different teachers who'd gone through accelerated pathways and other different pathways, and they talked quite a lot about how people go through the accelerated pathway and perhaps become very hungry for the high workload, which is interesting given what we spoke about earlier, and progress very quickly to leadership and the pros and cons of that. And I just thought it was really interesting discussion.
Fabulous. John, coming to you next.
Well, I listened to a show that was, I think, a week ago last Thursday, Paul Hazard's Late Show on a Thursday night, and he was looking at reframing. And there's two good reasons for listening to this show. But first, there's Paul's wonderful Northern Irish accent, which is a delight. You can just, alone, that is like musical speaking. And he was leading us through an interview with two guests. I think it was Professor Brianna Kennedy and Professor Amy Murphy. And these were academics who carried out some research and so on into reframing. And reframing, I thought, well, I think we're going to learn something new here. I think I can guess what reframing is, but I was wrong, of course. And so I learned an idea about how you think about the classroom. And it's and essentially, if I could sum it up in one phrase, it was there are different frames of understanding when you're in a classroom. And this gives you a technique for standing back and seeing the wood through the trees. And teaching is spinning plates on sticks, teaching is firefighting, all those things. So this was an opportunity to stand back. And I think sometimes academics, with their ability to stand aside from teaching, can give us that insight into teaching that we are just engaged in rather too much and too close up. So it was a great show.
Fabulous. Christopher, coming to you.
Yeah, my show was Anna Hudson's show on PSHCE provision, which I thought gave a really good and engaging consideration of education's most significant under-examined curriculum, arguably, with some great ideas to bring to the practice of teachers everywhere who are obliged to deliver PSHCE in their contexts. So well worth a listen.
Fabulous. And my show this week, and I just again, like Kathryn, had to just double check the title. So this was Khan Duke's show, incorporating environmental sustainability in your classrooms. And Harry Waters was brought back for this one, who is a former Teachers Talk radio host. And they were talking about actions that can help nudge environmental awareness and sustainability issues in our learning spaces, because it's something that I still don't think we talk about enough, particularly with younger children. They are aware of things, but it needs to be reinforced all of the time. And it talked about the steps you can take and the things that you can put in place. So well worth a listen to that as well. We've had a very busy morning this morning. We have covered an awful lot, which has been great. So thank you for all your contributions. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, John. Thank you, Kathryn. It has been enlightening as always. Please do make sure that you, if you are not already, that you can follow us on Twitter at TT Radio Official and on LinkedIn at Teachers Talk Radio. And this show is all over a variety of platforms as well, including YouTube and LinkedIn. We've got a fantastic schedule coming up next week, as always, with loads of different things happening. I've got a chat with Spelling Shed in the works on Tuesday evening, so please do join me for that, because I think that would be very interesting about teaching spelling effectively, along with so many other things. It's hard to keep up, really, at Teachers Talk Radio, because we've always got different and wonderful things going on. I wish you all a fantastic rest of the weekend, and we will probably do this again same time next week.
Bye.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused